this is Karen Burniston, and today's video is an assembly video for one of my die sets, number 1010, the Flower Pot Pop-Up, and you can check out all of my designs at karenburniston.com. Okay, tons of versatility with this one because you can use the pieces independently or you can put them together to make a pretty impressive pop-up card. And as always, colors, card size, and theme is completely up to you. The die set includes 14 individual dies, and I've placed them here on a magnet sheet while I do the video today. I'm going to start first by making the flower pot. So I'll need this die here, and I'll need the die that does the lattice work. I'm going to need to cut each of these dies twice, but luckily if the cardstock isn't too heavy, the dies are able to handle a stack of 2 at once. So I suppose that depends a little bit on your cardstock, and it may depend on your die cutting machine. You can use any die cutting machine that will accommodate a wafer thin die, and I'm using a Sizzix Big Shot today. But just make your sandwich like usual, roll that through the machine. Good idea to roll back through since you're going through 2 layers. So here's what you end up with: 2 halves of the flower pot, and then you've got 4 lattice work pieces. And step 1 is always just to work all of the folds of the pieces. Doesn't really matter which way you fold them because you're just training those folds. Everything should get flattened right back out again. But do that on both of the flower pot halves, and then also out on the end of the lattice pieces there is a tab that has a little smiley face on it, and you want to work the fold line next to those tabs in both directions, and do that on all 4 pieces. Once all those folds are trained, then it's time to start connecting the pieces together. So the 2 halves of the pot are going to connect using a side tab. So I need to add a strong adhesive on top of that side tab. Today I'm using glue, so I'm using my Fineline bottle, 20 gauge bottle, filled with Lineco neutral pH adhesive, but you could just as easily use a very strong tape. Pretty straightforward to attach those 2, but I can fold in the middle and just make sure that both halves of the flower pot line up nicely with each other in the closed position, so they should line up perfectly. Then I just want the flower pot open, so I'm looking inside the pot where I can see the tab. The flower pot is actually a re-release of a die that I had licensed to another company, and I changed some things about this version, and one of the big changes I made is adding the smiley faces onto the tabs. So basically you want all smiling tabs, no frowns, and then you're ready to start linking these together. I like to pick up this one that has the notches at the top, hold that vertically, and then grab one that has notches at the bottom and link those 2 together. Next, I can actually lift this up by holding on to the one that has the notches at the top. I can lift it up and then slide in the other one that has the notches at the top. Now I've got 3/4 of it done, and what I want to do is I want to hold these 2 at the same time. So if I hold those 2, then I'll be able to get in my final piece. And it will take a little bit of wiggling because you're trying to hit those both notches on both pieces, but if you just take your time, you can get that piece in there. Now you've made that kind of tic-tac-toe lattice that can collapse down into a single line, and notice I still have all smiles on the front of the piece and all smiles on the back of the piece as well. Now I can add that lattice inside my flower pot. So I'll need a strong adhesive on the 4 smiley faces. I'm going to use my glue, but you could use tape or a glue dot instead. Here's what I want. I want the center of the lattice right over the center of the pot. And then I look out here to my final tab and I make sure that that comes up to, but doesn't cross the score line for the top of the pot. And it's the 4 smiley faces that have glue underneath there. So those are the 4 locations that I want to press. Now I'm going to add my glue or strong adhesive to the smiley faces on top of the strip. So I've got 4 smiley faces. Then I want to fold in the side of the flower pot that has that side tab. So while I'm pressing to make the smiley faces stick, I want to add some adhesive to that side tab so that when I fold in the other side of the flower pot, it's actually attaching in 3 locations, the 2 smiley faces and the side tab. Now it's just a matter of opening the flower pot. The lattice is going to expand. You want to open it and then close it the other way. So basically just keep on going until you can squish the flower pot closed in the opposite direction. And that way it really has no direction to it. Any side could be used as the front or the back. The die set includes two identical sets of decorator dies, and these are meant to create the paper pieces that are a little bit smaller than the parts of the pop-up flower pot so that you can get that nice little shadow all the way around. And if you put two pieces of paper or cardstock under each die, you'll actually be able to cut everything that you need in one pass. So I added those striped paper panels to all four sides of the flower pot, and then I added the brown panels to the tops of the flaps. Now, the bigger the card, the bigger the bouquet I can add inside the flower pot. So I decided to go pretty large. I'm going to make a 5x7 card. So I need a 10-inch by 7-inch piece of paper to be my outer card. Now I have to make that my outer card because it's too wide for my machine. So I've cut an inner card that's 8 inches by 6 inches with a score up the middle, and that's what I'll use to cut the tabs for the pop-up. But here's the thing about pop-up cards that need to open fully flat. Having a big fold glued inside a big fold is not an easy thing. It never really wants to open fully flat again. Best thing, cut this outer card in half. Now, if you don't want to cut it all the way in half, there is another option. That's what I'll show you here on the video today, and that is to cut it mostly in half. So what I mean by that is you take a craft knife. Probably a good idea to use a ruler depending on how deep your score is. My score was pretty deep, so I was able just to kind of run my knife along that score line. What I want to do is make it just as loose and flimsy as I can, but still leaving it slightly connected. This is the pop-up die, so it comes with the set. It's got the alignment nubs, which go right over the fold of the card. Now you can position this die anywhere, but the little cutout in the middle that looks like a triangle is meant to point towards the front of the card. And also, because of the way that the flower pot will sit when the card is closed, something like this, you really want that pop-up positioned more towards the front of the card so that you have more room to hide flowers and things behind it when the card is closed. Definitely a good idea to use some temporary removable tape to hold that die in place while you die cut, and then it's just a matter of rolling it through the machine. So let's take a look at what the pop-up die does. It cuts a tab on either side of the fold, mirror image tabs that fold up just like that, and they fit perfectly right into the corners of the flower pot. You'll want a strong adhesive on the top of one of the tabs. I'm using my glue, but that could also be a glue dot or some strong tape. Now you want a very good connection on that tab. So the best way to do that is actually to lift the card up, and then you can put pressure on both sides of the tab as you're seeing me do here, and just give it a second to make sure that it's really well connected. And you want that tab right there in the corner of that flower pot. And then I'm just going to repeat that process for the other tab. So the glue goes on top of the tab, and then I'm going to give good pressure on both sides of the tab to get it connected right in the other corner of that flower pot. Once both tabs are connected, the pop-up will start working. You just need to close the card. The pop-up die will fold down flat, and this is another opportunity to give some good pressure against those tabs as well, because you can do that in the closed position. I'm going to add a generous amount of tape runner all over one side of the pop-up card, and what I want to do now is get the fold of the pop-up card directly over the fold of my backing card. And if I had taken the safer option, which would have been to cut that brown card in two, I would have just made sure that the fold of the pop-up card was right on the edge of one half of the backing card. But since I'm trying to do that thing with the loosey-goosey outside card, then I just need to make sure I'm really taking my time. And then I just need tape runner over the other half of my pop-up card. Then I'll open up the card and press it against the other half of the backing card. Now, I'm going to give this a test and see how I did with getting a fully flat card when it opens. I did a good job. It's actually opening up nice and flat because I reduced all that tension in the fold on the backing card. Now, if you needed to make an adjustment, you could hold the card in the air. Just be careful with this and run your knife a few more times against that outside fold if you needed to make it a little looser so that it would open up fully flat. The flower pot flaps can stay up, they can stay down, or you can do a combination of both. I like the front two flaps to go down. I just think it makes it easier for me to see my bouquet, and then I kind of like the contrast of the flaps being down like this. So I like to put a little pop dot underneath the two front ones and actually press them down permanently. And that can be done on the back flaps too. I just happen to like the back flaps being up. So I do want to point out the differences in this set versus the one that I had previously licensed. On the decorator pieces, that's where you're seeing the biggest change because all three of these flowers are different shaped flowers than the ones that I had done previously. The vine is different and it now includes 2 flower centers. For your flying object, it's not a butterfly this time, it's a bumblebee. Okay, now I'm going to make my bouquet. And what I like to do is just start crazily die cutting all of those decorator pieces. You really can't have too many. I like to pull the colors out of whatever pattern papers I've used, and I just die cut, die cut, die cut. You can usually do 2 layers at once. It may require you to go through your machine and then back through your machine, but that'll give you pieces twice as fast. Okay, full disclosure, I am not the flower whisperer, but I can do a little bit of shaping. And what I do for that is I just take the flower and I put it on something soft. In this case, a piece of fun foam. You can see kind of how old and cruddy this is. It just came from the craft store. And then I just need something like the end of this paintbrush, just something rounded that I can use on the back of those petals to push down into that fun foam, and that will make those petals start to curl. And then once I've done all the petals, then I can turn the flower to the front again and just do my best to kind of get it to splay out there to where I can take that paintbrush then around the center. And that creates that little shaped flower, and then I'll use the larger flower center to give it some contrast. Now another idea is to stack up the flowers, and in that case I'm going to do my shaping to my middle flower and leave my big flower flat, and then I'll use the smaller center for that. And of course, you may choose to have some of your flowers have rhinestones or enamel dots in the center instead of the die-cut center, so that's another option. And a little glitter glue or stickles in the center can also give them a little shine. Okay, let's talk about bee styling. My favorite way to make the bee is to cut it out of a yellow cardstock and then also cut it out of a black cardstock where I've added double-sided adhesive to the black cardstock before die cutting. So that means that I'll have black on the back and then the top will have an adhesive layer. Okay, so adding stripes to the bee, I just do that with a black pen. It's just much quicker that way. You could cut the bee again out of a black cardstock and then cut the little stripes and glue them over the top, but it is much quicker to do with a pen. And then if you want him shiny, you could add glossy accents or pounce some ink and emboss with clear powder. Now the reason I cut 2 bees is because I like to sandwich a piece of wire between those 2 bees, and that makes it really easy to add flying bees into the bouquet. So I've taken a piece of black wire, I think it's about 22 gauge, I'm going to guess on that because it's not marked. And I just need to find something small that I can wrap it around to put a curlicue into the wire, and then what I want to do is pull that back out again. So then I can sandwich that wire in between the 2 bees, starting by pressing it into the adhesive that's on the black bee, and then using the remainder of that adhesive to attach the 2 bees to each other. So let me show you my favorite way to attach these wire bees inside the flower pot. I've taken a piece of cardstock that's the same color as the lattice work, and then just put some double-sided adhesive on one side, poked a hole in the middle, and stuck the wire through it. So now I'm going to peel up the liner on that tape and stick the wire down in one side or the other. It doesn't really matter. Now I don't want to sandwich this closed yet because this is what's going to be used to attach it to the lattice work. But what I can do, as long as I keep my finger between the 2 layers, is I can kind of adjust the angle of the bee and which way it's facing. And then once I've got that ready to go, then what I do is I just take that little pinch, basically I just take that little folder and fold it right over one section of the lattice, anywhere I want. And then now that will attach the bee so it's flying up in the air. And I can adjust then the angle and the height of the bees, I've added 2 of them here, by just stretching the wire. One thing that you want to check is, does it stay within the limits of the card? That's why I usually add them first, because I can check, I can see their antennas are sticking out of the card. So all I need to do is just lower them a little bit, maybe put them at a different angle, just kind of hold at the base while I just adjust the wire until I get a location where they fit. So building the bouquet, completely up to you how many vines and flowers you use. A little tip from me is if you double the vines, which means glue 2 to each other, but don't put glue in the stem area until you're ready to attach them to the lattice, then you can go in there and add the glue to the 2 stems, keeping them separated while you choose a location. and then let one stem attach to one side of the lattice while the other one attaches to the back side of that same piece. And that will make a nice sturdy base for suspending a vine and a flower. Now I'm building my bouquet inside the flower pot after it's already been attached to a card. And that's because I had already decided that I wanted a 5x7 card. So that's going to limit the height of my flowers so that they will stay hidden by the card. The other option would have been to build the entire bouquet in the flower pot and then collapse it down and see what size cards you need. So you can always do it either way. If card size doesn't matter, just build your whole flower pot first, collapse it down, kind of measure and see what size card you would need to hide it. So we know that this card is going to get displayed open, but the front being just blank is a little boring. So my favorite thing to do is use my leftover materials and basically replicate the look of the inside of the card with a flat version for the front of the card. A 5x7 card fits in an A7 envelope, just a standard envelope. And then when that gets pulled out of the envelope, they're going to be impressed even with the front of the card, right? It's pretty. But then, of course, the real magic is when they open it. You know, cards like this don't need much additional decoration, so I just added a thinking of you greeting using word set number 1, and then some of the labels from the Catherine label pop up, leaving myself a blank oval in the bottom right that I can sign. If you would like to see photos of this card as well as a lot of other samples, check out the gallery on our website. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBurniston.com. You'll find information about where you can purchase these dies as well as links to all of my other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.